Welcome to It's 5 o'clock here, where we will learn why James Bond, likes his martini shaken and not stirred, and why that poor sucker is so wrong. James Bond, our favorite, dark, mysterious, and always handsome MI6 agent, on the front lines wherever he may be. One thing we do always know is that he does like his drink, especially his martinis, and he's very particular about how he takes them. Everybody knows that James Bond likes a martini shaken and not stirred. But why? Well, the real reason is that Ian Fleming, the author of the James Bond books and the creator of Mr. Bond, he was a huge narcissist, and he modeled Mr. Bond off of himself. So Ian Fleming, he was an operative of intelligence during World War II, and he also quite liked his tipple. He actually died at the ripe young age of 51 due to some heart conditions, likely a stroke, some other things, but he was also a raging alcoholic, to be quite frank and serious about it. But one thing that Mr. Fleming did like was he liked his martinis shaken, not stirred. And some say it's because he liked the way that one particular German bartender did it. But I think he just kind of figured it out that way. He went to a bar, he had it, and that's just kind of how he did it. And sometimes it's nice to have that little catchphrase saying, I want it this way and not that way. You know, it makes you sound cool, I guess. But let's get down to brass tacks here. Now, the original James Bond martini, the Vesper meaning evening in Latin, and actually named after Vesper Lynd, one of the OG Bond girls who last made her appearance in the 2006 Daniel Craig Casino Royale, and first appeared in the 1953 book Casino Royale. She said that she was born on a dark and stormy evening, which is why her parents named her Vesper. And so the Vesper Martini was born. James walks into a bar and says, I'd like, in a deep champagne goblet, I would like 3 parts of Gordon's gin, 1 part vodka, and a half a measure of Lillet, which today is just known as Lillet, which is a white wine-based aperitif. Now there's also the Lillet Rouge, which is the red wine, but it serves essentially the same function as a vermouth in a martini. So the Vesper is a type of classic martini. And so then James proceeded to say, you need to shake this very well, and then you need to serve it with a large slice of lemon. Now, I'm gonna tell you right now, I made that drink just to know what it tasted like. It tastes like a lot of gin. This is all alcohol. And if you did the math with me, that was 4.5 ounces of pure alcohol, nothing else. Lillet, which is the lowest ABV item in there, which rings in at, let's see here, 17% alcohol by volume, because it is a fortified wine. So essentially, you have one of these, you're good to go for the evening. And I highly doubt that you could aim your PPK very well after a couple of these, because Mr. Bond does quaff back quite a few. Now, there was a sort of scientific study done where some gentlemen, some folks, let's say folks, read all of the Ian Fleming books, and they calculated that essentially all of these took place over roughly 87.5 days. And they took out the days which he could not have actually drunk alcohol, Mr. Bond being he, of course. And that was about 12.5 days when he was imprisoned or unconscious or, completely not able to have any liquor. And so you take that And so you've got 75 days in which he could actually be imbibing. And so what this study found out was that Mr. Bond perhaps liked his items shaken and not stirred because he had an alcoholism-induced tremor. Because after they calculated it all, James drank 92 units per week of liquor, which is 4 times the recommended amount, which is a lot. So 007 was 00 overdoing it. And that roughly equated to, on his maximum day, he had almost 50 units of alcohol. Like, that's more than most folks have, like, at a pretty rough tailgate or Keeneland or wherever you are. Whatever big outdoor party that you know, it's more than that. So essentially, Mr. Bond, there's no way that with all of his, you know, parkour prowess, could be jumping from building to building, seducing ladies. He definitely had some issues in that department if he drank that much liquor. Yeah, essentially, like they said, well, maybe he liked it shaken because he was. Now, so this is, I actually stirred this one though, because I don't like my martinis shaken. But this, it just tastes like gin. Now, the Vesper is actually an IBA, which is the International Bartending Association's. It's an official IBA drink. And so they actually, they publish a recipe for it. And I like it very much. And it is much more approachable and much more, how do we say, not going to put you on the floor, and allows you to still, you know, undergo whatever espionage you'd like to encounter for the day. So we are going to start out with 2 parts gin. 2 parts gin, and I'm actually using the rest of my Royal Foundry Craft Spirits gin. It's lovely. It's got a little bit of absinthe and lemon, which actually works really, really well in a martini like this. So I'm going to do 2 parts, not 3. All right, so 2 parts directly into my mixing glass. Now, they say that Mr. James Bond. I loved James Bond as a child. Not saying that I don't anymore, but I love James Bond as a child. I thought it was the coolest. Still is the coolest, but made an early impression on me. They say that Mr. Bond potentially would have liked it shaken because then he always preferred Russian or Eastern European vodkas, which would likely be potato-based, which were a little bit more oily. So the shaking would disperse the oils. And I'm like, well, you know, I still, even if I had a potato vodka, I wouldn't want to shake it, because what shaking does, and I think that the best president that the United States never had, President Jedediah Bartlett, explained it the best when he was speaking to young Charlie in the episode Stirred. He said, shaken, not stirred. It'll get you cold water with a dash of gin and dry vermouth. Now, the reason that you stir it with a special spoon is so that you don't chip off all the ice. Now, James is ordering a weak martini, and he's being snooty about it. And Jed Bartlett, I agree with you, sir. And really, the main thing that shaking is going to do is it's going to increase the amount of dilution. It's also going to increase the amount of aeration that you've got in that cocktail. And frankly, when I've got just liquor, I've got this lovely gin, I've got this Lillet, which is, it's sweet, but it has these wonderful wine notes that have their own little essential oils that are going to impart wonderful flavor. And I'm using Kettle One for my vodka, which, listen, I'm not a vodka drinker really, but, you know, it's clean. It just kind of amps up the clean flavor of it. And really all you need is just for this to be a little cold and just add a little water to dilute it to make it all have that nice little warm hug and all those ingredients hug together. So that's why I think that stirring it is so much better, because you don't want all of those little ice chips in there and you want it to be nice and clear. And I'll show you what that looks like when we shake and stir this. So I've got 2 ounces of gin right in here. Now, let's pop in 1/2 ounce of our vodka. not 1 ounce, as James said to do. Man, can you imagine if you were on like a work trip and you were like, oh, I'm going to have 4.5 ounces 85 times in the next 3 weeks. Oh, I realized. We're also going to then do 1/4 ounce of Lillet. This is Lillet Blanc, not Lillet Rouge. Lillet Blanc. I'm just going to keep saying things in French. Anyhow, so then we're going to pop ice in here and we're going to give it a gentle stir because yes, Jed, that's why you have a special spoon, not to chip the ice. But also it's because you want to make sure that it just like rolls along the ice and it doesn't impart too much water into it. So we are then going to give it a nice little stir. Can you imagine? So, oh, actually, I think, or did Ian Fleming? Yeah, Ian Fleming was 53 actually when he passed. And he was such a heavy smoker and a heavy drinker. But fun fact about Ian Fleming, so yes, he wrote about a dozen James Bond novels, but then he also was the author of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Ha! And he wrote this crazy book for like the Kuwait Oil Company and they didn't really like it. He had a very odd life. He had a very, very odd life. So, let's see here. Ah, yes, this is about it. This is about it. So now let's take our strainer and let's pour this into a glass. Now you can see how beautifully clear this is. Look how beautifully clear that is. And now I'm gonna take a little bit of lemon and express it over the top. Just like I do on a regular martini. Now, let's take a little bit of this and let's shake it. And let's see what that looks like. Boom. And I'm gonna take the one that I couldn't drink because it's far too much alcohol. And we're gonna shake it and we're gonna see what it looks like. And we're shaking and we're shaking. But seriously, can you imagine firing a very small gun or like driving and maneuvering a sports car through like a casino or through these little tiny Italian roads while you're literally hammered and schnockered off your booty? First off, very inadvisable. No driving and drinking. However, like, Lord, oh, I would never get enough work done. Oof. All right, so here is what it looks like shaken. That is a shaken martini. This is a stirred martini. You can clearly see the difference. One is much prettier than the other. Shaken, stirred. This one has a lot of ice in it. This one just has a little bit of ice in it. Oh, it's beautiful. It's nice and round. This is exactly how James would have liked it. It's a lot of gin. And you can see it still has lots of air bubbles in it. And there's also little bits of ice in it. And I read somewhere where they said, oh, well, maybe they wanted him to shake it, the bartender to shake it because they said, oh, he wants it as diluted as possible so he can get to work. But considering he was also drinking like mint juleps and sake and champagne and scotch and brandy and pretty much everything else under the sun, I highly doubt that James had many sober moments. But regardless, to you, Mr. Bond. I'll take mine stirred, not shaken.